the day the Heliox Dominion released its Spectre bombs over the Terran refuge, world of Alderaan 3, extinguishing 5 million lives in a single violet flash. Something ancient and heavy shifted within. Humanity, something older than its treaties, older than its diplomacy, older even than its dream of civility among the stars, and when the smoke finally thinned over the cratered ruins, Earth understood that the age of polite warfare and negotiated mercy had ended forever, not with a declaration but with a quiet, shared certainty carried like a pulse through every surviving human heart. And so, while the Dominion celebrated in their crystalline throne halls and broadcast their triumph to a dozen client species, Terran Command gathered in a dim chamber beneath the Pacific, surrounded by screens still flickering with the last transmissions from Alderaan 3, children running, sky splitting, towers dissolving into molten glass. And in that suffocating silence, the decision was made. No more civilized battles. No more rules written by distant powers who had never bled. Within a week, the Heliox emissaries were expelled. Earth withdrew from every multilateral treaty, and the sleek diplomatic ships that once carried gifts and negotiations were replaced by the sharp-edged silhouette of the Retribution Fleet, a vast armada built not for conquest, but for ending the possibility of another. Alderaan 3 forever. The galaxy watched with a mixture of amusement and unease as human vessels, black-hulled and glareless, slipped past borders and into the cold dark of unregulated space, their intentions unannounced, their engines disturbingly silent, until the first target, Heliox Outpost. 9 simply vanished from long-range sensors, not destroyed in the way most civilizations waged war, but erased, stripped to atoms by a gravitational implosion so precise that debris had to be mathematically inferred, and in the aftermath, hundreds of species began to understand that humanity, for all its talk of restraint, had spent centuries preparing for a moment when restraint was no longer an option. The Dominion responded with mockery at first, calling humans melodramatic primates, incapable of real war, but their confidence faltered when a second outpost collapsed into a silent singularity, and a third had its star destabilized, just enough to render the system uninhabitable without violating any interstellar laws. Not that Earth cared for laws anymore, and as panic spread, neutral nations begged humanity to stop, demanded negotiations, pleaded for dialogue, but all pleas were returned unopened because Earth had sent only one message to the wider galaxy, broadcast in every spectrum, translated into every known language, and repeated across the void without emotion: "You massacred our children. There will be no further warnings." In response, the Dominion assembled the largest combined armada in its history, a 20-species war machine spanning half a light year, bristling with weapons designed to shatter continents and boil oceans, confident that raw force would cow the humans back into their former, cautious shell. But when that armada reached the edge of Sol, they found not a trembling world, but a sphere of artificial satellites forming an interlocking web of shimmering light, a planetary shield of such sophistication that even the Dominion's brightest tacticians could only stare in stunned disbelief. Still, they fired, unleashing a barrage capable of ripping a moon apart, only to watch their weapons dissolve into harmless bursts of fluorescence against Earth's barrier, and as their astonishment deepened into dread, the barrier opened just enough to release a single Terran vessel, a slender, obsidian spear of a ship moving with the impossible acceleration of something that bent the space around it. It did not fire missiles or beams or projectiles, but rather transmitted a pulse of coded gravity that folded the Dominion flagship like soft metal and scattered its fragments across millions of kilometers. And in that instant, the armada broke, commanders shrieking contradictory orders as ships collided, retreated, or attempted to jump away, only to find every escape vector blocked by human drones that had silently positioned themselves hours earlier. Yet even then, humanity did not attack the fleeing ships, for their objective was not annihilation, it was demonstration, the kind that engraved itself into the spinal memory of a civilization. And when the last Dominion vessel limped into the nearest neutral port, its crew trembling and incoherent, they spoke of the humans not as soldiers or revenge seekers, but as something colder, something that simply refused to let another atrocity occur, while it still drew breath. And so the Dominion, in a move unprecedented in its proud and vicious history, surrendered without conditions, offering tribute, territory, reparations, anything to make the humans stop. But humanity accepted none of it, instead demanding a single concession: the complete disarmament of every Dominion world and the public, trial of every architect of Alderaan III's destruction. These demand a single concession: the complete disarmament of every Dominion world and the public, trial of every architect of Alderaan III's destruction. These demands were met not out of moral awakening, but pure existential terror. And when the trials concluded and the guilty were handed over to Terran custody, humanity dispersed its fleet, not to conquer, not to expand its influence, but to patrol the borders of vulnerable civilizations, a quiet guardian without banners or fanfare, driven not by glory but by the memory of a violet flash over a peaceful colony. And though many in the galaxy whispered that Earth had become monstrous, dangerous, unpredictable, those few who visited memorial sites on Alderaan III understood the truth. Humanity had not become a monster. It had simply stopped pretending that monsters could be reasoned with. And in that terrible clarity, the galaxy's most fragile species had become its most uncompromising protector.